Welcome, Wargamers, to the hungry kitchens of the mortal realms, because today we're talking about a very special faction that exists within the Age of Sigmar community, mostly, if not Age of Sigmar the game, and that is the Gnomad Feastmasters. Now, if you have never heard of these guys before, that makes completely sense. This is not a Games Workshop product. There is an incredibly cool blog known as Plastic Craic online, and I believe that's how it's pronounced, and he put an immense amount of work into creating his own personal Battletome for the models that he wanted to use, in this case, halflings, gnomes. And when I say that there's an immense amount of work here, I'm going to have all the relevant links. All credit goes to the blog Plastic Craic. Like, it is as if he worked for Games Workshop and created like a pretty good, faux Battletome. There's an incredible depth to the history and the lore. We're going to get into a brief overview here. I don't want to spoil all of it because I want you to go support this dude. But rest assured, this is really stinking cool. There is an ungodly amount of work that went into this. And so today we are going to do a brief overview of the Gnomad Feastmasters. I know if you head over to Etsy, there are several shops that do custom miniatures with halfling stuff, so you could play, if you wanted to use them like in a proper event Age of Sigmar, you could proxy them as City of Sigmar or something like that. But honestly, you should really just ask the TO if you can use the Gnomad Feastmasters book. It's not broken. No one's going to accuse you of gaming the system. It's basically a giant sign that says, I'm here for a good time. Now, it is important to remember that halflings, even though they have not yet shown up in an official capacity in AOS, were just as much a casualty of the old world as any other species. Elves, dwarven, humans, and so on. And the myth surrounding their re-entry into the mortal realms is just as mysterious. It's literally just something that there's people here now, and Games Workshop doesn't really show any intention of answering those questions, and I'm okay with that. And so let's talk about them as a faction. The way I was trying to approach this, what's the simplest way to introduce to an entirely different, new faction? I think going from an outside perspective and then an inside one is probably the best. So from an outside view, we know humans, dwarves, and elves. What do they see when they look at halflings? And the answer is, not much. They seem to have low intelligence, they're weirdly focused on food, but they can be useful in society. They make great cooks because all of these armies require an entire staff to feed and maintain. They have a great knowledge of the natural environment, like natural remedies, what things they can eat to live off the land, and so on. So overall, not a big piece of the puzzle, but they can find uses in society. Again, they fit just as much as every other fantasy race. But on the whole, halflings seem to generally kind of keep to themselves. They're kind of just staying off in the periphery. They find jobs to do what they want to do, but ultimately, the busybody nature of other species in the mortal realms, if there's we're gonna go hang out and eat some food. And that's a pretty good description for those halflings who live in cities or support cities' armies. But what about those who roam abroad? And that's really the subject of this Battletome. It's not referring to every single halfling in the setting. The Gnomad Feastmasters are what you call these packs of halflings that go off on their own. Halflings travel the height and breadth of the mortal realms. Their intellect, strength, and in-depth culture remaining an utter mystery to the rest of the forces of order, barring maybe the Sylvaneth. And that's just because the Sylvaneth have probably seen them more than any other species. Now that is a big promise, right? That there's all this great culture within the halflings that everyone else sees as dumb. Let's unpack that just a bit here. What is it that other factions do not get to see? Well, one of the coolest things is that these are stated to be possibly the children of Nuffle. And if you don't know who that is, okay, it's a deity that does not have a seat in Sigmar's mighty pantheon, which is a disgrace. He is the deity of half chances. And if you are not picking up on this, it's a Blood Bowl reference, which is an American football game set in old world fantasy. We will do lore on Blood Bowl at some point, I promise you. But that is really the last and current incarnation of what halflings are to GW, so saying that that is their deity is worshipping the deity of football in the old world is a really fun, kind of cheeky way to bring them forward. Also, I love the idea of Nuffle actually being a god somewhere just around the mortal realms. I love it. But let's start with their culture, okay? They seem uncultured to everybody else. Well, it goes a lot further than just being snacky all the time, because what this Battletome postulates is that the Gnomad Feastmasters, and really halflings in general, are a people that's entire history, value system, and social structure is communicated through the meals they eat and serve. So we have some loose examples in the real world. Something like Passover and the Judaic tradition, where the various foods, the order that you consume them, and the story that goes along with them are meant to convey a specific tale. It's a whole, I'm going to use the word vibe, but you know what I mean? It's a whole experience. I've done a great one of these when I was much younger, and it's beautiful. But what if we took that concept, right, of using a meal to convey a story to an extreme, like to an Age of Sigmar fantasy extreme? What if, as a species, the halflings were able to sense and retain more from food-based traditions rather than oral traditions? And that's what we're talking about. By choosing hyper-specific flavors and seasonings and spices, the head chefs of the Feastmasters are able to tell entire stories and grand lineages of their people, valiant moments, deep despair, and the spirit of endurance. They can cook memories and experiences and stories into their meals, but can also taste them. Like it's a communication both ways. You have to be able to project it and receive it. And it makes it an entire method of communication that is simply beyond us. Because head chefs do not actually record their history. They pass it down through apprenticeship. Over years and years, you have to train to become a head chef. So that's the cultural aspect. Why are they called nomads? Probably is a good next question, besides the obvious pun on gnomes here. Well, this is where we expand from their particular culture and more into like how they fit into the mortal realms, right? What do they look like in the context of the setting? And there's a lot here to tackle at once. First off, there is no singular empire. There is no, grand poobah of the Gnomad Feastmasters that everyone hails to and from. Instead, there are what's called trails. Imagine like a web going over the mortal realms. Individual packs of Nomad Feastmasters will disperse across this web. And sometimes the web ends at a city and they'll have a regular trade route that ends in a particular city. Sometimes it's just old forests where good herbs and food can be found. It seems random to everyone else, but really it is a true society unto themselves. The way that they navigate the woods, they're constantly going through the forests, using secret passages just like the Sylvaneth do. And each of these trails begins to kind of have a sort of personality all its own as the Nomad Feastmasters share the same meals and experiences along the same paths. That's how you get the sub-factions. It kind of changes them over time. Now, another defining aspect of them in the realms is that they are a truly transient society, but also equally communal. And by what I mean is, it's described that everyone is polyandrous, so everyone can pretty much be with anyone. Kids who are raised on a trail basically just follow whatever tribe, pack, clan, of Nomad Feastmasters they happen to be with. They just pick each other up, but they raise each other communally, and they rely on the experiences of the trail and the storytelling through their meals to unify them into a cohesive people group, which is a very interesting way to divvy up sub-factions. It's just everyone raises everyone, but the types of foods that you encounter and the routes that you travel, the other species that you encounter on your travels, all those things go into a soft sub-faction idea, because it would look different trail to trail. Now, every once in a while, these trails are all brought together for an event called the Grand Feasts. And this is essentially where the woods come to life with all kinds of music and food and merriment, and a majority of the culinary traditions are passed down. Now, there's a lot more to unpack here. I want you to do it yourself. Honestly, I do, because I think this is a thing that you need to look at to appreciate because of how much work went into it. There's a whole ton of stuff about created units, their time in the Age of Myth. Go explore it. But I want to end this video talking about why is this so cool. To me, this is Warhammer at its purest, right? An unreasonable amount of effort put into the most unreasonably silly fantasy setting for the use of toy soldiers. That's the hook that gets me every time. Their story is woven well into the greater history of the mortal realms that chaos didn't take them because they were kind of everywhere. They're just kind of spread out throughout the woods, so they were able to react a bit more easily. They are nomadic by definition. Their heritage and culture seen as weak to the average person, but only because they literally cannot receive the culture, the messages, right? They can't taste the story, if you will. And I love that. When you put it all together, it's essentially an army of rangers, which is kind of the artwork gives you a sense of, like small groups moving through dense terrain, masters of the environment and trails with a culture that is hard to perceive to outside. It's a hobbyist dream come true, and every event should allow it straight up. You'd be crazy not to. Friends, I would love to hear your thoughts on the Nomad Feastmasters. Please leave it in the comments down below. I always pin the most helpful ones to the top. If you're someone who actually plays this faction, I would deeply love to know what list you run, just to get a sense of what the model variety is like. Let me know down below, and I will catch you there. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.